I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. Yeah. And all my life you have been faithful. Oh, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I will sing. Goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I've surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I've surrendered it all. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running, it keeps running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God with every breath and for all my days. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Efia Owusu-Fofie. I'm currently serving as the first president and executive director for 3 business entities, the Coders Who Travel Foundation, Coders Who Travel Limited Liability Company, and Coders Page Incorporated. These three businesses operate out of Maryland, Virginia, and Ghana, respectively. Thank you, Mac, Carl, and the entire team esteemed DC leadership for today's invitation. Distinguished guests, it's an honor to stand here and have the opportunity to share highlights of my career choice options and how those options have made me who I am today. Before doing that, I will share my life growing up and some family dynamics because that basically set me up for my career choices. It seems like yesterday when I was in junior high school and senior high school, just like you precocious teenagers gathered here today. You see, I grew up in a former British colony called Ghana. Ghana is based in West Africa. As an only child, I was raised by a single parent, my mom, from when I was born until I was about 12 and a half. My dad visited us occasionally. About 1994, my mother's bigger sister made a case for my mother to move in with her. She persistently convinced my mother to switch residences from her one-bedroom apartment into the boys' quarters of the university campus Bangalore, where she lived with her husband and her 6 kids. I was about 8 years old when this happened. It soon became clear that I was not eligible to attend the university's primary and junior high school, reserved for lecturers and other staff of the university. But my mother and I showed up at the principal's office every day for half of a school term until he assigned me a class. In those days, my maternal grandmother, stayed with my auntie at the bungalow. I often saw her kneeling in her room praying. She doted on me and fed me well when she visited. In addition, neighbors helped raise me. Often boredom will drive me to visit my friends between the time my mother will come home from school, from teaching. I can count about 5 families who allowed that little girl to watch cartoons and play video games in their homes. The overarching activities in my life during those times were school, after school classes, and church. You see, my mother and her 2 brothers were Muslims who had converted to Christianity and had been disowned by their dad as a consequence of their decision. Her 2 brothers all enrolled in Bible school, and my mother, who was a teacher with her salary, partly sustained them and even some of their other friends. Therefore, I grew up surrounded by a lot of need and want from people whose single goal had become knowing Jesus Christ more on the one hand. On the other hand, I witnessed stable families living on the university campus committed to higher education. Some of them also served God in meaningful ways, although not as desperately as the former group. Some of them were also atheists. Once, when I went riding my bicycle, I got my chain entangled, and soon a man driving an S-Class Mercedes-Benz stopped over. When he realized that it was a long way from my home, he gave me and my bike a ride home. Later, I learned that he was the registrar of the University of Science and Technology, where I called home. This sums up how each neighbor cared for other kids in the community, even if they were not theirs. One time, I also remember that during my dad's visit, my dad could not. I also remember that during his visit, my mother could not get my dad to agree to pay for my after-school extra classes program. Extra classes, for short, ran for about 2 hours every other day. My auntie, who was a teacher, leveraged her charisma to court some of the best teachers who were local to provide additional emphasis in some 10 to 12 subjects. Looking back, we were always learning. We had about 8 teachers coming in at the time and about 6 to 10 households enrolled simultaneously. This structure had become the standard in most homes. It was the tried and true template in our community. For instance, 2 of my bigger cousins had gone through the program and made it to their dream senior high schools. By the way, majority of prestigious senior high schools in Ghana are boarding ones. It was incumbent on my classmates and I to follow that pattern and end there as well. But what was my mother going to do when she could not afford the fees? That she prevent me from participating, even though those classes were right in the corridors of the house where we lived? My mother decided to talk to the teachers to have empathy on me. As teachers themselves, they all knew that their salaries were not that much. Fortunately, the teachers had a meeting on our behalf and allowed me, the girl without funds, to join in with the kids from two-parent homes who were financially comfortable. In other words, they gave me an opportunity I could not have had based on my family status and allowed me to fit in with the other kids. I count those teachers twice among my heroes. I watched my mother receive help from others, but I also saw her pay it forward. There was a time when I was 6 when she loaned our bedroom to a newly minted married couple who did not have any place to go and stay after their wedding ceremony. The man had been disowned by his family for switching religions. When I was about 12 years old, my mother began preparing me to move in with my dad. She had me call him and break the news to him about her new man in the United States and the decision to bring me over to him as a result of her impending absence in the country. The date for me to move was set. As soon as I was done with taking my basic education certificate examinations, I'll be sent to my dad. I passed the exams, getting 9 A's and 1 B out of 10 subjects. I gained admission into the prestigious Wesley Girls High School. Established in 1836 by a Methodist missionary called Harriet Wrigley, Miss Wrigley left the shores of her country and later died of malaria after establishing a sewing school for girls within her influence and locale. In Wesley Girls High School, I learned things like no excuses. I was expected to be on time and show up no matter what. My day began at 5:15 a.m. and ended at 9 p.m. Those disciplines I learned in boarding school are very much a part of me. I became troubled in my early teens. The move in with my dad was not so smooth. While my dad raised me to be studious, while my mother raised me to be studious and contributing very little to household chores, my dad and stepmom saddled me with more household chores and no after school extra classes programs. This recalibration was to make me become a submissive African woman in the future. There were 5 kids between them, my stepsister, my 3 half brothers, and I. My stepsister and I were responsible for doing most of the cooking, primarily for our 3 young brothers. I did that from the age of 12 until when I was about 23. Other house rules included not being allowed to date any boys. In their absence, of course, we sneaked in a handful. About when I completed boarding school at 17, my parents began fighting about whether I should enroll in biological sciences on my way to medical school or mathematical sciences. My mother preferred the former, while my father insisted on the latter. It is hard to enforce your wishes when you are fighting from America over an issue in Ghana. So my dad enforced his will. Looking back, the Ghanaian society was very much enamored with doctors, so it is hard to imagine a parent that would not support medical school ambitions in Ghana. But that truly is what happened with my dad. He believed that my mathematics grades were consistently stronger than my biology ones, and he stood his ground against my maternal family pressures. So here I am enrolled in mathematical sciences at the premier university in the country called the University of Ghana in Ghana's capital, Accra. My dad takes me to lunch and double checks how classes are going 2 months into it. Since I love it, we are now on the same page. Attending university offered me the opportunity to meet all female and male contacts from Kumasi, the city of my childhood pals, Cape Coast, the city of my early teen years buddies, and Accra, the city of my late teen years friends. The accommodation on university campus was hard to find, but with the help of one of the lecturers, a friend of my dad, I got into one that had just opened a year ago called Jubilee Hall. Immediately, peer pressure mounted, as this was one of the halls for the kids of high-end parents. Some drove, some were given more money. While my dad could well afford that lifestyle for me, he never did. So I had to walk from my hall to my lectures and back while others drove. I had to get extra money from my mother via Western Union every month because my dad's allowance was meager. At university, I reconnected with friends from all my alma maters, young men and women pursuing a variety of programs. At the end of June 2004, I learned that two of my friends were in London. I got the desire to also travel. My mother financed the trip, and so I was able to make my first trip outside Ghana to visit London too. I stayed there for about 6 weeks and worried my mother's cousin, Auntie Patricia, to get me a summer job. I was unsuccessful, but she did take me touring the Buckingham Palace and a few other highlights of London. Her daughter Eileen got me on my first and last roller coaster ride until 2019. I hated it. I also reconnected with my cousin, Mami Ifwa. She was pursuing medicine in Russia and will visit UK during the summers. We used our pocket money to visit Finsbury Park to shop for clothes within our meager budgets. Upon return to my university, I earned the name Boga, which means the traveled. I traveled for the next 3 consecutive summers. I found a job as a fundraiser advocating for the blind, cats, dogs, and children on a commission-based job. The next summer, I visited the UK again and found a job as a waiter, a cleaner of an office posting. The next summer, I visited the UK again and found a job as a waiter and a cleaner of an office post closing. There are two jobs that I run away from, I must confess: working on an assembly line in a clothing factory, sitting in one spot and making sure a pad fit a hole. I also had to sweep at another clothing factory all day, and I ran away again. It was while doing those jobs when it hit home that work is hard if not in your area of interest or passion. In the summer of 2005, after returning from a trip to the United Kingdom, I learned that I had failed in two subjects: Introduction to Probability, Introduction, Introduction to Real Analysis, emphasis on introduction. I had failed to decide earlier that semester whether I was going to do computer science and statistics versus computer science and mathematics. Naively, I postponed that decision, and that meant carrying two extra elective classes I did not need to. I was overwhelmed at that point because of not passing. I learned that I would have to graduate in 5 years instead of 4 years because those classes were prerequisites for 3 junior year courses. I learned that others who had failed like me were going to stop pursuing mathematics or statistics and instead pursue psychology, which was deemed less demanding. I followed them to understand what it will take to change programs at the university in my junior year. I had to repeat my sophomore year and take psychology classes I learned. So I dialed back and decided to confront the courses I failed in by taking them again. About that time, I visited a neighbor at the International Student Hostel too. She had a pocketbook and it had the name, The Prayer of Jabez. I asked if I could borrow it and she agreed. I learned of a man in the Bible called Jabez, whose name meant pain, who said a simple prayer that God will enlarge his territory and that he will not cause pain, and how God answered his prayer. After reading it, I dropped to my knees and asked God to help me not cause pain and for him to enlarge my territory. Specifically, I asked that he enabled me to turn my grace and life around. Not long after, I had this new passion that I was more than what my grades showed. Where was the Ephia who passed 9 A's and 1 B just 3 years ago? I decided to seek counsel from the course advisor at the statistics department that year. It would be the first time I was using that resource. It just so happened that he, a Ghanaian American, was the same lecturer who taught my introduction to data analysis, which I loved. I told him how I could not register for the classes because I had failed in the prerequisites. He simply said, "Young lady, if you're able to maintain a GPA of 3.5 this semester, I will allow you to register for all your classes next semester." I walked out of his office and immediately went home to my room and began drawing a plan for me to graduate in 4 years instead of 5. With the fewer classes, I could concentrate more. I also learned of two gentlemen, Aki and Asem, doing extra classes. They were teaching assistants. I enrolled in their classes. I also paid attention to very smart peers in my year group who made time to explain what I did not understand during my first 2 years of college. My GPA for that semester was exactly 3.5 with all the hard work. I returned to my course advisor and he kept his word. He wrote me a waiver to give to those who were registering, and I got registered in my fourth year first semester for the three classes I could not register the year before. It was my most crucial semester, and I made a 3.5 doing about 9 classes. About the second semester of my final year, I noticed all my closest girlfriends who had never dated were all of a sudden dating, and immediately I wanted a boyfriend too. One gentleman, also enrolling in the extra classes, sent me a note that said, "I love you. We agreed to date. Bad timing though. We should just have focused on the last semester and pass it well and date outside school." So my grades for that semester hovered around 3.0, and he himself did not fare that much better. That immediately strained the relationship. Soon we broke up. Just before the last semester wrapped up, my stepmother invited my stepsister and I to come home and be with our half brother, Dave. He was struggling to beat a new disease. Within 1 week, Dave died. He had been misdiagnosed. The doctors had been treating him as a malaria patient instead of meningitis. He was my favorite half sibling at the time of his death. My dad took all of us to the United Kingdom to attempt to distance ourselves from the situation. We changed houses to and where we lived. I excelled in a class that the head of Department of Statistics was teaching. Marjorie saw my potential and asked me to help her with registration at her upcoming research conference at an eminent research institute in Ghana. Afterwards, she was so pleased that she asked what I'll be doing in my 1 year national service period. She suggested I consider becoming a teaching assistant for her sampling survey methods class and in regression analysis. Shortly after becoming a teaching assistant, I started attending regularly an interdenominational church on the university campus. I decided to become a member, and after seeing the elders to tell them my salvation story, I was assigned to a Nigerian missionary who helped me to rededicate my life to Jesus Christ. She asked me how she could pray for me. I looked at her and shared that it had been 5 years since I last saw my mother and would very much like to see her once again. We prayed about that. That month, my dad mentioned that he keeps receiving magazines from an organization based in the United States on my behalf. It was the American Statistical Association. Isaac, the same course advisor, had signed me up to encourage me on the rewards of sticking with statistics. I used some of the money my mother sent me to enroll in it back then. I noticed that the 63rd Applied Statistics Deming Conference will be happening in Atlantic City, New Jersey from December 3rd through to December 7th, 2007. With my renewed faith in Christ, I would have believed the impossible then. I circled it with a pen, called my mother, and told her about the opportunity. She told me New Jersey was not too far from Virginia, where she was. I spent weeks at the internet cafe filling the required US Embassy forms. Later, when I attended the interview, I was given 5 years multiple entry visa. For me, that was the first miracle God did to honor my rededication to Him. That December, I arrived at the John Fitzgerald Kennedy Airport, got in a taxi to the Greyhound station bound for Atlantic City, New Jersey. I stayed at the Tropicana Resort and attended all the conferences. Afterwards, I bought another ticket bound for Virginia to see my mother. In February of the following year, 2008, I returned to Ghana to complete my teaching assistant appointment. The head of department was so impressed that I had actually returned to a developing country after a taste of an advanced country. My teaching assistantship contract ended in June 2008. My auntie at the time had just started a human resource consulting company, so I joined her firm as a statistician. We undertook comparative analysis studies of compensation of her past workplaces like KPMG and the UN. I also conducted workshop trainings for employees of telecommunication companies like Tigo and MTN. My stepmother and dad fell into a depression and began being unreasonable following the death of my brother Dave. I did not realize it then, but I do now in hindsight. My dad would give me curfews of when I should be at home by 8 p.m. each night. I was also to start washing his clothes and cooking sometimes for him. This was very much a time I needed to find a permanent job as my auntie's project ended after 3 months in October that year. My dad at the time was the chief executive officer for Sterling Financial Services, yet here I was job hunting. The breakdown in communication eventually led my parents to decide that it was best I leave Ghana and headed back to the United States to be with my mother. My dad and stepmother were basically saying they were tired. I have lived with them. I had lived with them from 12 and a half to 23 years. So I bounded for the United States and arrived on November 4th, 2008 on election day of Barack Obama. Thank God he allowed the embassy to give me a 5 years visa the prior year. I started babysitting for a church member with three kids when I arrived. I took the GRE 3 times before making a 1350. I aced the TOEFL. I applied to Penn State, George Washington University, and George Mason University. I only got into GMU. I was accepted into both the Statistics Department or Operations Research Department in a dual Masters of Science program at Mason. I deferred for 1 year to change my legal status and worked as guest services representative in a night audit at a Marriott hotel after that. I learned that I could become a graduate teaching assistant also at Mason University. So I left the hotel jobs and planned to graduate in 5 semesters. This plan was similar to the one that I made when I was in a fix in my undergraduate days. After 3 semesters, this happened. I got my first C in statistical inference in my graduate program, and that meant I could not become a teaching assistant for that semester. We were required to maintain at least a B in all subjects. That same semester, a drunk driver crashed into me while driving my mother's Toyota RAV4. It was less than a mile from where I lived. As the car approached in the same lane I was driving in, it felt surreal, like a very bad dream. I thought of a few options like jump out of the car or swerve the car by driving in the opposite lane. 3 days after the accident, I was in great pain. Eventually, the pain led me to an orthopedic center. It just happened that as the doctor on duty asked me questions and tried to establish rapport, he learned that I was studying statistics at graduate school. He shared that the center was pioneering a research project on the effects of gentamicin on shoulder surgeries they were performing and in need of a volunteer research statistician intern. Fortunately, I had a printed copy of my resume in my car that I retrieved and shared with him. He passed it on to the project coordinator. Sometime later, I received word that I had been offered the role. It was very difficult for me to accept the offer initially. I kept thinking, are these doctors not rich? Why should I just volunteer and not be paid? On the back of 4 graduate classes, 2 in statistics, and 2 in operations research, I decided to take the role. It helped that I got wise counsel from my Sunday school's college and career group. Just like that, I secured an unpaid internship in corporate America. Fast forward some 8 months later, the experience was one of the requirements for a paid internship role job posting at Progressive Insurance Company. I applied and I got flown to Ohio, their headquarters, for an interview. I was one of 7 candidates. During the interview, I shared the work I did during the unpaid internship at the Orthopedic Center, which was to use SAS, Minitab, and Microsoft Excel to do data cleansing, create graphics and charts, and perform statistical tests. I also mentioned the meetings to provide updates to the medical team that I attended. I got the role. I wrapped up my work at the insurance company in the summer of 2012 after doing a lot of market segmentation analysis and generalized linear models routines using SAS and Excel. I completed graduate school with a Master of Science in Statistical Science and Operations Research in 2007 of December. One of my proudest achievements. I suddenly remembered that one of my former lecturers mentioned a foremost think tank he worked at, and I applied for the senior programmer analyst role. During the interview, they wanted a sample of SAS codes. The same SAS codes I developed during the unpaid internship was the one I shared with the hiring team. Again, I got the role. After working at Mathematica for about 3 years as senior programmer analyst for producing national reports for the National Science Foundation, one of my colleagues invited me to a data science DC event. Later that evening, the Meetup app suggested Women Who Code DC also to me. I checked it out and ultimately decided to launch an Accra chapter in Ghana in November 2015. One of my friends who had joined Deloitte and Touche LLP talked to her manager about me after the maiden launch of Women Who Code Accra. We spoke on the phone. One thing led to another, and I got a job offer to become a risk/data analytics consultant for them. The highlights of my career there was helping organize 70 separate programs for a team working on a project called Nursing Facilities Initiative, as well as developing a Tableau dashboard for the Navy Medicine Group to replace a clunky Excel one. At Deloitte, I began to create Coders Who Travel as part of my firm initiative. In March 2018, I became full-time at Coders Who Travel and has briefly worked for 11th Hour Service and Integrity Management Services as a manager and a data scientist, respectively. When you work with God, everything that is seemingly mundane in your life now will one day make sense. As earlier stated, I'm the first president and executive director of the Coders Who Travel Foundation in Maryland, Coders Who Travel LLC in Virginia, and Coders Page in Ghana. The Coders Who Travel Foundation is committed to inspire and advance the careers of coders in underserved communities. Coders Who Travel LLC delivers data and predictive analytics solutions. Coders Page Incorporated discovers local gurus in developing countries. One of my favorite quotations is, "Never give up on a dream just because of the time it will take to accomplish it. The time will pass anyway. So just do it." This is by Elle Nightingale. I'll be touching on innovation, altruism, and execution. First, I will discuss my social entrepreneurship endeavors, and then I'll discuss my unique path, that is my selfless concern for the well-being of others. Then I'll discuss how my personal, business, and professional relationships bring success to coders who travel. So I begin with innovation. Innovation is defined as the action or the process of innovating. Synonyms are change, alteration, revolution, etc. In 2015, I took an adventure. I visited Ghana after 7 years of living in the USA. I launched the first West African Women Who Code network. I executed 7 events: hackathon, SaaS studio demo, seminar, networking night, panel discussion, excel in your career workshop, and lightning talks. Soon after, a reporter from Huffington Post took an interest in my work. I met him while I was in queue at a conference by SaaS Institute called the Premier Business Leadership Series. Trent Smith was the reporter, and he published it in June 10th. These are some of the quotes. I thought at the time that I needed to start this great idea with big names. That did not happen. One person led to another, and then another, and the rest is history. It taught me that it's okay to start an extraordinary course with ordinary people. And the title of the article is Learning to Code is Changing the Lives of Ghana Women. 6 months later, a South African reporter called Lerato Mbele also visited the women during a coding workshop on December 16, 2016. And this is the direct link that features this segment. These were the challenges: long commuting distances to venues, lack of funding to cover internet and lunch. Women gurus are super busy to give back to up and coming women. Volunteering is not supported by the culture and the social status of many. Experiencing a financial and operational gap with Women Who Code headquarters. Now, the chart that I've featured is the number of hours for a member to attend Women Who Code. So the y-axis is the number of women, and the x-axis is the number of hours. So as you can see, 9 people out of 15 are traveling 2 to 3 hours to get to the nearest co-working space for events. And that is an obstacle that is hard to overcome. We experience successes. As a team, majority of us experience career transitions together shortly after the launch. We gain media exposures. We gained understanding of the concerns of programmers and women in developing contests. We learned how to launch an organization internationally. We gained new friends and colleagues. We partnered with Statistics Without Borders. The annual report, the detailed annual report, is available upon request. This is a name of each woman and the transition they experience. I transitioned from mathematical policy research to Deloitte and Touche. Samantha Chu transitioned from D3 Systems to Booz Allen Hamilton. Judith Aboche transitioned from Idel Consulting Limited to Insano. Patience Teiko Tete transitioned from Idel Consulting to Advanced Ghana. Gloria Dogbe transitioned from Impact Hub Accra to Idel Consulting Limited. Ida Heathcote Fumado transitioned from New Touch Technologies to Origin Limited. Asabia Saramenta transitioned from Dream Oval Limited to VIE. The case for coders who travel. Just like I, a senior programmer analyst at the time at Mathematical Policy Research, traveled to Ghana to launch the first Women Who Code network. I believe that when one coder travels, great things happen. To help me understand the contract I signed with Women Who Code, I sought counsel from a nonprofit attorney in January 2016. He encouraged me to start a new organization to tackle some of the financial and operational gaps that I experienced. In October 10th, 2016, the Huffington Post article and the BBC Africa airing were the icing on the cake to convince three of my colleagues from Mathematical Policy Research and Deloitte and Touche LLP. Over pizza and drinks, the attorney explained the pros and cons of establishing a nonprofit organization after they committed. Altruism, the belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. Here's how I've displayed that. It cost me 10,000 US dollars to launch the Women Who Code Accra project. Do not do anything for them until you see their money, advised a neighbor at the Enclaves while I was living at Enclave Silver Spring. One accountant also said, I understand from Samantha that you have blown through some money, and by her projections, you will incur costs significantly when this is said and done. Here is proof that I did launch the initiative for Women Who Code and that it cost me almost $10,000. It's also signed by the Global Leadership Director. What I learned to do for others, I have now learned to do for me. And so at the 2-year-old milestone for Coders Who Travel, I've also spent 10,000 of my own money for the initiative. Here's the balance sheet as of October 31st, 2018, and we had spent 9,000, almost 10,000. It cost me to launch Women Who Code Accra and Coders Who Travel because that same year or the following year, I could have used the money used to launch to make a down payment to move into a house. And here is proof that 4916, 4916 Dane Ridge Circle Woodbridge could have been mine. My point, when you choose to serve, it will cost you. And so you have to be ready for that. My increasing responsibilities took me to the intensive care unit in February 2016. It's been said by Gordon B. Hinckley, if life gets too hard to stand, you learn to kneel. Why did I go to the ICU? Well, demands at Deloitte and Touche were a lot compared to my job at Mathematica. I also was a bit disappointed of not receiving the reimbursement, the full reimbursement. I'd also suffered a broken engagement in a personal relationship. But through it all, I discovered the power of songs for healing and growth in my relationship with God. And it was while in the ICU that I promised God that if I got out, I will sing and let the world know what He's always done for me. Surviving the ICU was not all I had to deal with. I went through a harrowing experience where the remnants of my disease had to be managed at 3 separate hospitals: the Holy Cross Hospital, the Washington Adventist Hospital, and the Innova Fairfax and Innova Mount Vernon. This has become one of my scriptures now from the Bible. I tell you the truth. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. And as you can see, sacrifice is dying to yourself. And because of the cost of sacrificing, others now are enjoying the fruits of that first seed, which is my seed. Execution, defined as the carrying out or putting in effect of a plan, order, or course of action. My childhood friend Clement connected me to the first co-director of Ghana, Judith. Asabia, a friend who worked at the University of Ghana, ICT, while I served as a teaching assistant in 2007, connected me to Chloe, Winnie, and Eunice in 2015. All three became Java and Python leads for Women Who Code Accra. Seth, a LinkedIn connection, connected me to Ida and Anne in 2015. Ida became the web evangelist, and Anne became the PHP lead for Women Who Code Accra in 2016. Michael Phillips, former classmate, did photography and also asked his boss to provide free venue for 6 days to launch Women Who Code Accra. Michael Soli, friend of Judith, did videography for all the events. Nana Cole, an accountant, connected me to Emmanuel in 2015. Emmanuel introduced me to Gloria, who later became our social media manager for Women Who Code Accra in 2016. Stephen, my former lecturer, brought 2 co-workers, also classmates, to the events. Amma and Amma were close friends in the college. Amma handled catering, and Amma shared her story of no longer programming. Angela came to the program after seeing an advertisement in the university bulletin. Moving on to Coders Who Travel. These are the board of directors. I met Christina at Mathematical Policy Research while working as a senior programmer analyst. I met Gary while seeking operational support via Statistics Without Borders for Women Who Code Accra. I met Angie at my local church while seeking to have a mentor through the Women Mentoring Program. And we have 1 vacancy on the board right now. There is our advisory committee. I met George at a TEDx Tyson's event. I met Carl at a George Washington University event. I met Jill at a GMU Statistics Department event. I met Gary via an elder at Emmanuel Bible Church. I met Barry via LinkedIn. I met Maria at Mathematical Policy Research, and she's formerly my supervisor. Here's our circle of consultants at Coders Who Travel. I met Crystal at church via an evangelism program. I met Lasandra via Statistics Without Borders. I met Kelsey at Mathematical Policy Research. I met Latanya through Gary. Our work at Coders Who Travel is garnering recognition. First is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization and the World Manufacturing Forum. I was invited to speak about policy framework for emerging economies. Also, Facebook conducted a data gaps in gender data, and I was invited to just participate in the event. I was also invited as a panelist to speak on how to initiate a movement at the Africa Tech Summit. We've also been featured on the Diaspora Network television, Uh, our Accra members, Angela and Bright, were invited to talk about coders who travel as members in Ghana. So this is a tweet from the World Manufacturing Forum tagging United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And this is our panel. This is a journalist from Class CNBC, Italy, and we spoke about the barriers women face by sharing our own path from childhood, adolescence, college, graduate school, corporate America, into leading coders who travel and women who code Accra, a project featured in Huffington Post and British Broadcasting Corporation. She also talked about the digital divide and the potential of computing in emerging areas. These are the faces of our panel. Gentleman Sadar Ahmed came from Pakistan. Olga Mehmedovic came from United Nations Industrial Organization. And there's me representing coders who travel and will code Accra. There was Joyce from Kenya, and there was Jürgen from the European Commission. This is the LinkedIn message of a Facebook person inviting me. This is Africa Tech Summit. These are Accra members being featured on the Diaspora News Network television. In October of this year, we are hoping to have a conference, most likely a virtual summit. This was moved from March of this year, should have happened in March of this year, but moved to October. You can donate your air miles to support travel. These are the ways you can partner with coders who travel. And this is our contact information. Thank you. So in conclusion, the choices that have made me are as follows. Commitment to lifelong learning beyond the classroom as displayed in enrolling in all those extra classes. Seeking out experts and smart classmates to explain concepts I do not get on my own. Being disciplined, showing up, what my boarding school taught me. Adaptability, moving in with my dad and my stepmom and adjusting to my new set of circumstances have prepared me well in adjusting in the workplace as well. Gaining traveling exposure in the United Kingdom, even as I traveled to the UK for 4 consecutive summers, working odd jobs, which enabled me to decide that a blue-collar job was not for me. Getting back up after failing 2 subjects in my undergraduate classes and barely passing statistical inference in my graduate class. Not dating early allowed me to concentrate solely on my education. Determination, deciding to graduate in 4 years against all the odds and maintaining a GPA of 3.51 and 3.43 in operations research and statistics respectively in the dual master's program in just 5 semesters, taking 48 credits. My faith, praying the same as Jabez in the Bible, the Nigerian missionary rededicating me, my first prayer together answered by God in the form of a 5 years multiple entry visa. Love, my mother selflessly modeling that. Respect, my dad unapologetically leading that. Open to counsel from the college and career class at the Baptist Church to take the unpaid internship, surviving the car accident. I will not be here but for the protection of God, passing along the baton of empathy from the teachers who did not charge my mother, to paying the price for women who code Accra, doing good work and being cordial at the workplace enabled me to court Maria and Christina to become initial directors. It also enabled me to court Mikhail, attending conferences, registering for the head of department, managing the registration process for the head of department, attending the Deming Conference, Premier Leadership Series by SARS, and African Business Forum by Wharton prepared me to go and launch in Accra. I met trained HuffPost reporter in line at one of the conferences. Ability to receive help and confide in others about my struggles, talking with a course advisor and borrowing the prayer of Jabez book, asking Nigerian missionary to pray for me, sacrificing an ability to purchase a house, sacrificing an additional 30,000 USD for the cost of CWT and Women Who Code Accra, networking, finding the different stakeholders and leadership to lead CWT and Women Who Code Accra, singing like I did to focus on being grateful, praying like my grandmother and mother taught me, and giving speeches. Thank you for your audience. I really appreciate it.